You expect Democrats to be way up high, especially given him hitting the record lows because of the Iran war not happening. And then you put in redistricting. Democrats in the National House vote, look at this, needed to control with redistricting. We really think the Democrats need between a 3 and 4 point advantage in the national vote. You average those polls together. We just saw on the last screen, Ipsos MU Law and NBC. It's right on the border there. It's right on the border. It is no guarantee. It is far from a guarantee.
So let's talk about the midterms and what I've referred to as the great patriotic vibe shift, because it continues to be the case that the Democrats' lead in the generic congressional ballot going into November continues to evaporate day by day. And there arguably are many different reasons for this. On one hand, you have the vibes, hey, America 250, UFC, the World Cup, all of these just sort of good feelings coming back to America. We have made the case those things do matter politically, and arguably they're a big factor in deciding elections. But you also combine that with the tangible things, gas prices coming back down, Democrats embracing absolutely stupid and insane candidates and completely unviable politics, and just generally reminding the public who their political party actually is and what they stand for. And this is all bringing us now to the point where you're starting to see the catch-up game now being played by Republicans, which is exactly the reason I've tried to tell people, do not sit around and simply despair about the midterms before they happen. I mean, sure, we are the incumbent party. That naturally makes us the underdog. Absolutely, the Trump deranged base is going to show up in massive turnout numbers, and we have to be ready to predict that because a lot of people do have something we call TDS. But at the same time, while it's not an excuse to get complacent either, I do not think that this generally just standing around and sulking and feeling bad about things actually is a viable political strategy, especially when there are some indications that show, hey, it may not be the blue wave that people are naturally predicting. And you know, a lot of the momentum that we're picking up at just the right time in this year after what you could maybe argue to be months of Democrats sort of winning back the vibe shift, it felt like. Now we're once again on the offensive. What does that mean? Well, let's talk about it, guys, in today's video, an update on where we recently are. According to, by the way, left-leaning pollsters demonstrating the vibe shift we may be witnessing. So let's get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, just a few days ago, YouGov, which let's remember, if you recall back to 2024 and before, this is a very left-leaning pollster. These guys are always overestimating Democrats. Well, take a look at this. So the generic congressional ballot among independent voters obviously matter, and in some cases are sort of the swing determining factor in national elections, right? But currently, as it stands, among independents, Democrats have a lead of just 5 points over the Republicans, leading us 24-19 among independent voters. Why is that significant? Because just last month, Democrats were leading over Republicans among independent voters, folks, by 14 points. As a matter of fact, this is the closest that Republicans are with independent voters. Here's an interesting statistic for you. Since February of 2025. That is right. So you're noticing things are suddenly shifting back. It's funny. I saw some leftist tweet the other day that basically said in reaction to some of these numbers that, well, gas prices go back to $3.90 and all of a sudden Americans are re-embracing the fascist agenda again. What is going on? To which I say, hey, I don't know, sucks to be you, right? I guess that's just how it goes, but certainly some positive signs you are watching. And by the way, let's also talk about Hispanic voters. This kind of almost is becoming a bellwether demographic, and especially many like geographically southern states. Take a look at this as well from the same or a prior YouGov poll conducted earlier in the month. As of 2026, congressional generic ballot among Hispanic voters, folks, Democrats now only lead nationally among Hispanics by 4 points. Here is the historical comparison from this exact poll, folks. In 2024, Democrats still led by +9, and then you go back in 22, Democrats led by 21 points. 2020, Democrats led by 27 points. In 2018, let's not forget a midterm where maybe Democrats are hoping to be able to replicate this time around. Democrats led among Hispanic voters in the YouGov poll by 40 points. Now, this time around in this midterms, folks, they're back to just D+4, which indicates a couple of things that are positive if this does obviously end up materializing. First and foremost, the Hispanic realignment that we witnessed post-2024 is continuing to be set in motion, which is obviously a very positive political sign given certain demographic shifts in this country, right? But then secondly, that you notice it would at least appear a lot of the anti-ICE hysteria has not done anything significant in really moving the Hispanic or Latino electorate all that much, which I find to be incredibly telling because this was a huge political weapon that you may remember Democrats were using against us even earlier this year. Arguably, they're still trying to bring it back. Look at the protests currently being held, and they're kind of reviving those outside of the ICE facilities. But it turns out what the Democrats keep throwing at the wall actually is not working. So this is pretty good news.
Just take a look here. Okay, this is Congress National June polls, Dem leads, and this is NBC News, midterm years with the GOP press. Look at this. They're up by 5 points, but that's half the lead they had back in 2018 when it was 10 points, and less than half the lead they had back in 2006 with 11 points when Democrats took back the House in both of those years. And now the Democratic lead is on a single hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. And it's this type of lead where you say, you know what, Democrats are ahead, but don't count your chickens just quite yet.
And Harry, we've been talking about this. As time goes on, you and I have kept on looking at these numbers saying it just doesn't look like the numbers we've seen when there have been waves for Democrats in the past. What are the trends in the other polls?
Yeah, okay, so this is not just one poll in which we are seeing this. There is this group of pollsters that are out there that are just not showing the wave you might expect given where the president's approval rating is. Okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about NBC, Marquette University Law School, in Ipsos. Look at where they were January and February, and look at where they are May and June. NBC, down a point. MU Law, down 3 points. Ipsos, basically staying the same. So the Democrats hold these leads, but again, you have this group of pollsters that are out there where this lead, simply put, is not matching what you might expect if you're expecting a Democratic wave.
And sure, absolutely, we never want to overreact to one set of polls at one point in time. This is why we have said don't also use it as an excuse for complacency, but it is worth noting we're not just talking here about one poll. For example, you look at the RCP average, which is an aggregate of most of the top pollsters in America, right? So this is sort of a wider sample size. May 28th, at the peak maybe of the gas crisis and all of those things, Democrats led by 8.1 points. Now, as of this week, the Democrat lead is only down to 4.8. So basically, ever since Trump resolved Iran and gas prices started to come back down, immediately the Democrat lead was cut by about 50%. Which, by the way, is also why, I mean, I know right-wing opinions are very divided on the deal and everything. I'm generally of the opinion that I think it's going to work out in the end, and a lot of people, you know, love to be panicking about everything. But even still, either way, okay, if you just want to talk about the pure political calculus of this, absolutely, it was the right thing for Trump to fulfill his original promise on this, which is it was going to be a temporary excursion. It was not going to be a forever war. And by the way, gas prices would recover basically immediately ever since this all was wrapped up and it was over with. And hey, look at what that's doing already, right? As that tweet said, I actually love that leftist seething tweet so much because it summarizes it quite well. Yes, the moment you provide price relief to Americans and sort of get the domestic agenda back as the main focus. Oh, look at that. Democrat support cut by about 50%. Pretty hilarious how that works. And by the way, looking currently, I know gas prices are not down yet to pre-war levels. By the way, we definitely got to watch out for price gouging in that regard because that is a thing that does happen. I know Democrats a lot of times talk about price gouging because, oh, their gas prices are always high and they regulate the crap out of the oil industry and then they blame price gouging. But one thing that does actually happen is that when you have an oil shock, and then oil prices come back down, usually gasoline stations and not the oil, but the gasoline merchants, right, are kind of slow to catch up to the price readjustment, basically because they're trying to drag that out as much as possible, right? Use the supply shock as an excuse to just sell overinflated gasoline. So Trump has already said the DOJ is getting involved in that. They're going to investigate that. They're going to try to make sure that doesn't happen. So hopefully that's all resolved. But what I would point out right now is that just as of this weekend, we're looking at the current national oil price in the United States, right? Oil futures. And they're already back down, folks, to about pre-war levels, right? Hovering around anywhere between $68 to $72 a barrel, which is almost exactly where it was the day before Operation Epic Fury all kicked off. And so, hey, that's a pretty significant. Things went back to normal fairly quickly. So you look at that. Hopefully that does translate as quickly as possible to consumer prices, but you're already seeing gas go back down. I saw gas get as low as even $3.50 in my area, which during the course of the conflict, it was already over at $4. So, hey, we can get basically around $3 national gasoline by the midterms. I think we're in a good position in that regard. And before you say it, yes, I'm fully aware that there have been minor flare-ups, for example, in the Strait of Hormuz, happened just this weekend. We've seen this go down many times before, even over the course of the prior ceasefire, where whether it's Iran proper or rogue elements of the IRGC or whatever's going on, right? You have a drone fired at some oil tanker and then America hits something back, but then everything cools off again. Okay, not going to overreact to that happening for the millionth time. But hey, big picture, here's what I see. If we can keep the situation relatively stable until November, and as stable as you can for Iran standards, which means likely, yeah, occasionally there's going to be something that goes down, right? But just keep the oil prices relatively at a level, okay? Then we're in a good position. And then, folks, let's not, again, I'm going to keep hammering this home, forget about that great patriotic vibe shift, okay? Because And I understand that people probably view this to be a rather abstract conversation. Like, what are you talking about? You're talking about vibes, you're talking about emotions. But here's the thing to understand. These things do matter in elections. In fact, one of the historically best predictors of how an election is going to go is simply that polling question of, do Americans believe our country's headed on the right track or the wrong track? And by the way, ever since this conflict wrapped up, immediately you saw those opinions getting better for us in that regard as well. But that's why I've also argued all of the good vibes coming to our country between the World Cup, UFC, the 250th, sort of this feeling that, patriotism suddenly made this big revival in the country and people feel great about things. We even have the snobby Europeans who are usually talking crap about America now praising it. Yes, when people feel good about things, feel good about their country, feel proud of their country, not only is that obviously just a good thing generally for right-wingers because, we're sort of the side of patriotic people, but also consider this too. When you are the party in the White House, you want Americans to be saying, my country's on the right track. So that way, obviously, they reelect your party and reelect you for more political control in that regard. So the fact that culturally we're sort of having this reset from, again, maybe the bad vibes that Democrats set between the ICE stuff in January and then high gas prices over the Iran war and all that stuff. The fact, and by the way, I think it is worth noting, the start of this year, you could say things felt, just the vibe of the country felt a little bit dreary, a little bit uncertain and all those things. And yeah, that is positive for Democrats. You notice that actually coincides with Democrats increasing their generic ballot lead. And then suddenly notice how when patriotism comes back to America and we're happy and the vibes are good, oh, look at that. The Democrat lead dissipates by about 50%. So I wouldn't even underestimate the effect of things like that, right? I doubt that any American directly thinks to themselves, this summer felt awesome to be an American, so I'm going to vote Republican. But yes, subconsciously, those things can dictate a lot. And again, vibes ultimately do decide elections. And this is why you can sort of see, and we've been covering, why Democrats, for example, were seething over, let's say, the UFC 250 at the White House. Why? Because it was one of those moments where people watched and they just felt that testosterone and, proud to be an American again. And actually, I'm not even joking about these things. That is damaging to leftists. Foreigners who Democrats vowed, oh, Trump is going to be using ICE to brutalize them. It's going to be a terrible time. America sucks as a country. It can't host the World Cup. This widespread culture of even Americans realizing, oh, our country's pretty great because look at what foreigners are saying about it, right? That stuff as well, I would argue, damaging to leftists, damaging to Democrats. They can downplay that. They can say it's stupid or ridiculous. So can Republican viewers saying, Vince, what are you talking about? You know, you're talking about cultural like nonsense and relating it to politics. But I'm just going to hammer home that matters. And that's why, to an extent, we are blessed, obviously, just in general as a country to be reaching 250 and all of that. But also that this is coming on the midterm year, right? The opportunity to remind Americans to be proud of America because, that stuff obviously does politically translate on many levels. So you have that. Of course, Democrats, what are they currently doing? Reminding the country how crazy and insane they are. We talked many times about the New York City primary that took place earlier this week. In a lot of ways, they're kind of just flailing as a political movement as of late. I mean, do you notice that? Do you notice how sort of useless it feels like Democrats have been, at least in recent weeks? From a political perspective, in January, to whatever extent you believe that's real, it sort of felt, if you remember, like their resistance was strong and it was united and it was loud. Where have they really been this summer, right? So you have that going on. Of course, we have crazy leftists vandalizing our national monuments. It doesn't help that everything they criticize that we're doing over the 250th, like the UFC, like the dirt bike thing, like the national renovations of monuments, it doesn't help them that also those things turn out to be awesome and they turn out to be successful. It's making them look stupid. And by the way, most Americans, I would say probably like 75%, are just going to be celebrating this 4th of July as patriotic Americans. And so the more the left wants to sit there and protest against it and vandalize our monuments and have these communist demonstrations out in the streets and all of those things, also, I would argue, probably not going to be a good political outcome for them, not going to be a good contrast. So it feels in many ways, right, like we're kind of back. Patriotism is alive again in America. The left is acting crazy and stupid as usual, but, on a maybe more national level, prices are getting better, gas prices coming back down, right? It does feel like things are trending in a good direction. And if we can keep up that sort of national momentum, folks, again, who knows if we win the midterms outright? I mean, that should be the goal, but even understanding that historically does not happen just because we're the incumbent party. Is this blue wave they're talking about going to materialize, or is it in many ways, I don't know, going to be sort of a Democrats falling flat on their face moment? That's why we cannot get complacent on one hand, but we shouldn't be demoralized on the other hand, right? Demoralized movements, demoralized people never get anything effective done. That's useless. Dooming and blackpilling is useless. We should have a belief that we can win, that it's doable if we put in the work. And by the way, the signs, the trends, the polls, all of those things are kind of indicating that. So that's just my thoughts, right? Let me know yours in the comment section down below. But until next time, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. See you guys later. God bless and peace.